Hello, everyone. We'll give everybody, there's more people registered than we've got in the meeting at the moment, so we'll give it maybe 2 more minutes and then we'll get started. All right, I think that's probably good. I think we've got everybody we're going to have. So Dave, if you want to get us kicked off, we'll get it going.
Sure, sounds good. So thank you everyone for joining today. So this is another session of our monthly webinars around the use of SharePoint and the Power Platform. And today we'll be covering some of the top 5 mistakes that people can make when they're actually looking at moving their internet into SharePoint. So with me is Zach Welding, who is our solutions architect and developer, chief architect over our SharePoint practice, and then myself. I am the director of operations here at BlueNet. So welcome. So our agenda, obviously we'll go through that quick introduction, talk real quickly on how companies often approach an internet build out, some high level type stuff there, and then we'll dive into the details, detailing 5 areas where folks can actually take a wrong direction and end up with something that they're less than happy with. Then we'll drill into each of those and then how to actually address what's going on. And at the end, we'll have a quick summary. So just at a high level, how companies a lot of times will approach building out a SharePoint site, maybe calling it an intranet or not. 2 major areas that people kind of tackle, and this is where we kind of see directionally some challenges. The first one is a lift and shift. So it's the idea like, hey, I've got a file server or I've got an old intranet site. I'm just going to take whatever I've got and I'm just going to move it on top of the SharePoint platform. So really not putting a lot of thought into what they're doing is like, well, this is what I got, and this is the fast way to get to, the new platform, and I'll get all these benefits. I'm just going to go ahead and pull it over. I'll pull over my file server, all the folders, all that structure. That's one major way that a lot of folks approach that. We'll talk a little bit about that in detail and where that can lead folks astray. And then the second one is like, well, hey, since we're in there and we're going to be doing this, let's throw everything in. And the idea here is like, well, we're starting with a clean slate, so we're just, anybody's got an idea, everybody's going to contribute. We're going to just put all these things in there. We're going to make it look great. We're going to have all this kind of branding and all these exciting things as a part of our site, and really not being discerning about, making sure that they're putting in the right stuff, they're getting the value out of the platform they're looking at. So those are 2 major ways that companies talk about doing that. And as we go through these particular 5 areas to talk about, you'll see how that approach kind of creeps in on these particular topics and where it can lead folks astray.
All right, so the top 5 mistakes. These are in no particular order. I tried to think about putting an order on these, but each one led to kind of like tying into the next one. So I'd say they're all equally important. So first mistake, treating the intranet like a file server. Second one, poor hub site architecture, or just architecture in general. Not having a governance model, over customizing the platform, and not leveraging all the capabilities of the Microsoft 365 platform. First one, treating it like a file server. So the mistake we see a lot of people doing is they're just rebuilding their network drives in SharePoint that already have large document structures. They're just keeping those. They're not reorganizing anything. That can lead to potentially poor search, low adoption, and essentially just doing the same thing in a different spot. So typically, the way that old or some still current file servers are created, there's one physical server that hosts everything. Sometimes each department has their own drive letter. Sometimes there is just one drive letter and then top level folders for each department that have unique permissions on it. By carrying over that model, you're going to run into a permissions nightmare. You're going to have a spider web of exceptions all over the place. So the fix is to kind of think about content first. We want to create pages for policies, procedures, different types of knowledge, and all of those private level documents, that lives somewhere else, which we're going to talk about in the architecture model. Digging a little bit deeper into that, so an example we have in a traditional file share, before you had an intranet, you have some benefits information probably stored in an HR folder, then in a benefits folder. Maybe you have it broken out further from like dental and medical, retirement, and so on. There's probably a handful of documents that make up all of the information about dental. You've got something from your actual provider. You might have a couple homegrown documents that somebody just manually made up with some more information that's unique to your guys' organization. And for a user to find that information, they've got to go into 2 different documents and try and figure out what they're going to do. So that's what we mean by a content first approach, taking stuff out of documents that doesn't need to be in a document and making it part of the intranet, making it part of a page. An intranet is a website. So an example of that, if we look at this recent intranet that we developed, here's the benefits summary. They still have links over here that look at their full PDF benefits summary. They've got historical versions of them here, but now is where the content first approach comes and shines. They've taken out some of the, maybe there's some of the common questions that they've received from users. When is open enrollment? What do I do if I have a status change? Who's considered a dependent? Who do I contact if I have a specific benefits question? Who's eligible? So rather than storing all this stuff in documents and just making a page with link to this, link to that, link to this, link to that, that content's taken out and put right on a SharePoint page. Just to go a little bit further, if we were to look at the dental page specifically, again, they still have links to the official dental documents, but rather than make a user go in there and find what they need, 90% of the time they're looking for the planned features. So they took a screenshot of that and put it right on the page. They've frequently gotten these questions asked to their HR department, so they put the answers out here so people don't have to ask these all the time. Saves everybody time. User can self-serve themselves. HR can spend their time doing something more important rather than just answering questions like this. So that's what we mean by content first. Second point, architecture. So some of the mistakes we see are people using hub sites simply for navigation, or even recreating classic sub-site hierarchies. That can cause governance confusion and painful rework during growth or reorganizations. The traditional SharePoint architecture or folder structure taken from existing file shares is not the approach that we recommend taking. I kind of mentioned that before. By taking a hierarchy like that, you're going to constantly fight the permission inheritance model, and you're going to end up with a spider web of permission exceptions that's going to be nearly impossible to manage. So what is the fix? Using hub sites the right way, right? It's an organizational boundary that has a handful of configurable inheritance models. So design, look and feel. Permissions can be inherited. I don't like using the inheritance model with permissions for hub sites, and I'll show you that in a second. And then search. So in the way that we found that works best to deploy an intranet is to follow a 3-layer approach. The 3 layers would be the hub, and that is typically the root site. I'm gonna bring this site back up so you guys can see what I mean. So when I say root site, this is what I'm talking about. Every tenant has a default SharePoint URL. That's this. It's the shortest one. It doesn't have the /sites after it. It's kind of just, like I said, it's the root. So naturally that fits the bill to where your homepage, your hub should be. The second layer would be all of the different sites that are associated with the hub. So again, this is going to play into the governance model below to give all of the departments the permissions and the ability to kind of build their own area easily and dynamically. We want to create separate sites and then associate those with the hub. This is done through the admin center. So those that have the SharePoint admin role can come in here, find your root site, and when you check the box next to it, there's the hub. So you'd want to register that as a hub site. And then all of your other sites that you're going to be tying to it, all the different department sites where you're going to be giving unique permissions to certain people to make changes, those would be then inherited. When you do that, you get a global navigation that is shared across the entire intranet, no matter where you're at. You can also inherit the permissions and the look and feel. The thing about the permissions, on the root or on the hub, you'll see you get this extra tab. I have it turned off. What this actually does is it creates a group called the hub visitors. It's a SharePoint group, and it gets shared, automatically added to every single site that's inherited or that's associated with the hub. The thing that I don't like about this is you can't turn it off. When you turn it off, it turns it off, but it leaves everything behind. So I've had bad luck with that. I've gotten bitten by it in the past. We don't use this, and in the governance model, we'll explain what our recommendation is there. If I were to go to one of these different department pages, that hub navigation is going to stay the same because it's inherited across the entire intranet. And if I go to change the look, you'll see that some of this stuff, it's being inherited. So you don't have to go through and set all those different themes individually on each site. It's all being controlled by the hub. The other piece would be search. So whenever you search, it's always going to be based on where you're at. In the administration site, if I were to search for the word policy, it's going to start off by searching just administration. Because it's associated to the hub, I can back up to the hub level, which is called the source in this case. Now I can search across the entire hub. That language is also displayed here. It'll say, oh, this one doesn't say that. It used to say, they might have been an update. It should say search across all sites. There is a PowerShell command you can run as well if you want to set custom text here, which we typically do. These guys opted out of that. But we would say search the entire source. And when you're on the administration site, we would say search only administration. That's a PowerShell command that you can run at the site level. So the hub would be the first level. That's this. The department site, that would be the second level or layer. And the third layer would be the private department or project or committee site. That's where the department's existing file share would go to, the stuff that only belongs to them. That stuff is not accessible to everybody. So we see the word intranet being kind of used a little loosely, and it can cause confusion because people will say, oh, it's up on the intranet. And if they don't know what the intranet means, they might think that it's just in SharePoint. So it's important to define and educate users on what intranet means, and it should mean the intranet. So that's the source. Anything that's out here, 99% of the content that's in the source, the intranet, is read-only to the entire organization. If something's in your private team site, that's not the intranet. So setting that distinction early on helps avoid some confusion. Next one would be no governance or ownership model. So again, the mistake, launching something without defined ownership can lead to stale content, permission sprawl, and IT ends up becoming the bottleneck because now they're managing something that they're not supposed to be managing. So what do? We want to define content owners. We want to have publishing rules and lifecycle expectations before we launch. Also training. Training is a huge one. The people that are supposed to be managing this content, they need to know how to make the little changes. So moving off file shares to an intranet, or even moving from an old intranet to a new intranet, obviously we're doing that to make things easier for employees and to make it more of a self-service platform and to take burden off of IT. But if we do it wrong, it can end up being more burdensome. So the permission model that we found works the best in our hub site structure is kind of in 4 groups, one of which might be optional. So admins, intranet admins. So this group would own the entire intranet. Somebody needs to take ownership of the entire thing. Typically, in most recent projects, it's been either HR or communications, not IT. Obviously, IT can give themselves access to it and help out if they need to, but the content owners are typically the people that are owning that entire platform. So we create an Office 365, Microsoft 365 group called Intranet Admins, and we add the various people that need to be admins. That group is then added to the hub and every one of the associated sites. So as people come and go, or intranet admins come and go, you're not adding them to every single site, you're just adding them to the group. The admins would have full control. There's another optional layer. You could have intranet editors if you need to distinguish between somebody who has full control versus only somebody who can contribute content. You could have another group called intranet editors, same concept. Create a Microsoft 365 group and then add that group to all of the sites. Then you have the department site editors. So the reason why we like that hub site model is so that you can dole out segregated permission and people can manage the content that they need to manage. So by creating an entire site for each department, if we go back to administration, for example, this allows the administration department to designate, we recommend 1 to 3 people to have the ability to maintain and change their site. Let's actually go to a different one that has some more content here. So within HR, you can see there's the staff. That's the 4th group, all users. They have read-only access. They've got a group here that can have edit rights. And then the source admin group, you can see that we have created that's shared across. So this human resources admins members group is just in human resources. We were to go to finance, there'd be a finance group here. That way they can only edit their content and away they go. We have seen other people or other architecture options that aren't as fluid. Say you don't use the hub site model and you just create a page for human resources and you want to give somebody the ability to edit that page. If you don't have an entire site for them, where are their documents going to live? They're going to have to live in a document library with the rest of the intranet documents. So now you've got a folder called human resources. You're going to need to give them access to that folder. You're also going to have to give them access to edit this page. Now you're managing permissions in 2 different places at the item level versus just using a separate site. So this is why we recommend the architecture that we do. One thing I'll say too about the visitors group, there is a built-in option within Office 365, everyone except external users. This is the easy one to use if you want to give everybody read access. The only thing that could be potentially negative about this is if you guys have contractor accounts or guest user accounts that you don't want to have access to your intranet. When you do this, it's literally everybody that has an email address within your guys' tenant. So like I said, if you have a contractor like me that has an account in there and you don't want me to have access to your intranet, you wouldn't want to use this. That's why you'd want to create a group, which these guys did. I believe they used the dynamic group, and then that way it's controlled automatically. So you can create rules in Entra within the dynamic group settings. So you'd have to come up with some sort of logic. Maybe for contractors and service accounts, you don't put in a job title. So the dynamic group could say, if they have a job title, automatically add them to the MWR staff group. Again, that way it's not an extra step that you guys have to maintain. Fourth one, keep it simple. We want to work with, not against, SharePoint, follow accessibility guidelines, and avoid heavy customization. Heavily branding or introducing custom code, can often break. I would probably change it. It will break at some point. If you're doing custom code, it's going to break at some point, and you're going to have to fix it. Microsoft to stuff all the time for good reason, and it's going to break, and you're going to have to fix it. We do have customers where we develop custom web parts for, because it absolutely was required by their business need, and expectations are set up front. They know that it's going to need to be fixed. We ran into it the other day. We created a bar that went across the top above the navigation that showed like a patient counter that had some algorithm written on it, and then it also retrieved their stock price. Microsoft recently changed one of the HTML attributes that we were using to pin that above the navigation to something else, and one day the bar just disappeared. So we had to go in and figure out what changed, and then fix the code and redeploy. That was fine with them, because they knew that was going to happen at some point, and it'll probably happen again. But it's worth it to them to have that custom web part there. So there are other options too. Third-party web parts through a trusted partner. We personally partner with Bind Tuning. They offer a full suite of web parts that greatly extends the out-of-the-box functionality for SharePoint web parts. They get they're on Microsoft's MVP list, so they know what changes are coming. They build the fixes in before the changes happen, and through their monthly updates, things continue to work reliably. This one kind of falls under the last one too, but I wanted to show it here because it kind of talks about over customizing. The last one is knowing the full capabilities of the platform. Same thing, keeping it simple, knowing what is out of the box. The trusted partner, you'll know if you can come up with a list of features or functionality that you want. It's pretty easy for us or another trusted partner to say, well, that's just out of the box, that'll work. That might require a little bit of work, or that's going to be a lot, I don't know if I'd do it. A brief example of that, a project we're working on now, they needed an area to give recent headlines, weekly headlines. Sure, SharePoint has the news functionality built in, but that was too much. We didn't need a full page. We didn't want to publish things and have the look and feel be different from each one. Older SharePoint had the announcements list. That's no longer a thing. You could just edit the page and type text over and over again and continually change the page, but we wanted to kind of see a history of the events, and we wanted it to look the exact same every time. So we decided to use a SharePoint list. Natively, a SharePoint list isn't going to give you that. It's going to look something like this, right? This isn't the most appealing to a user if we were to just stick this web part, like a list web part on the page. But there's different views that you can create within SharePoint. Some out of the box, some you might need to write a little bit of JSON, but this gallery view option was good enough. It puts it in a nice little box, has the title, the description, when it was created, and then we can throw that list web part on the homepage. And now they have a nice list to keep track of all of the announcements. They have a little form they can fill out, so the data entry is always going to be the same. We have character restrictions so that it doesn't become too long, and it was all out of the box. We didn't need to customize something. So had they not known or worked with somebody that knew that you could do something like that out of the box, potentially going down rabbit holes that are unnecessary to go down. Which leads me to the last point. Learn what the platform can do. With SharePoint Online, you have access to a whole bunch of stuff. There's lots of apps out there. Power Apps, Power BI, SharePoint lists, forms, different web parts. There's a ton of web parts that you can use. Web parts are getting different layouts all the time. AI is becoming way more prevalent in SharePoint. There's going to be a huge release of a newer AI ready, they call it the agentic SharePoint, coming out soon. So working with somebody or doing some learning on your own before you start to know what's going to be easy to do and what's not going to be easy to do is going to save lots of time in the long run. So we would recommend, like I kind of mentioned it before, creating a list of needs and wants or functionalities and having some discovery sessions. That way we can easily assign some numbers to things, or hey, we know this is going to take a little bit extra. It's not just going to work out of the box. Some things are really easy. There's a hidden checkbox. Maybe like in a list, you have a people picker field, and you really wanted to display their profile picture next to their name. 2 years ago, you couldn't do that. Now there's a checkbox that you can click and say, yes, show profile picture. Another recent example, we had kind of gotten down maybe 2 to 3 weeks into development on a intranet project. We circled back and we're kind of going over what was been done and stuff like that. And during the meeting, somebody had asked, well, how do I want to put a link to this Google form that I created out on the homepage. And I was kind of, eyes got big. Like, we're doing a project in SharePoint, Microsoft, and then they want to put a Google form link on the page. They had spent a bunch of time trying to figure out how to make the form work they wanted to, how to get email notifications sent from the form, all because they didn't know that we could do that natively in SharePoint lists. Just like that list I had shown before. There was a couple problems. The Google form needed the manager's email, and it required the person to type in their manager's email. So you're probably going to have somebody misspell it at some point, then it's not going to work. It was also supposed to kick off an approval process. So they had to try and figure out how they were going to do that by sending an email and triggering something else. And then what happens with the data that gets submitted? It's stored in Google. Somebody created it with their private, like their Gmail account, so the rest of their team members didn't have access to it. And it created, again, it was a waste of time to do that, not knowing that you could do a SharePoint. It solves all those problems. You can completely eliminate the need for somebody to type in their manager because the system knows who their manager is based on their profile. All the data is stored in the SharePoint list, which can live in that department's private site, so everybody already has access to it. There's form options built in so that we can provide a form to end users for them to fill out the data, but not give them access to the data in the back end. And then there's also out-of-the-box options for notifications. If you needed to start an approval process, that could be built with Power Automate. If you simply need notifications when something new is submitted, that too is front and center in the list. We go back to that weekly headlines list. Say someone wanted to know every time a new item was submitted. You can use rules. Pretty self-explanatory how to use this, but again, they just had no idea that this was even here, and they were shocked that it was this easy. We had the same form and a workflow built in a fraction of the time it took them to get the Google form set up and configured and kind of figured out. So that kind of wraps up the 5 things. Dave, did you have anything to add or a summary? Was there any Q&A that came in? I didn't notice anything.
We didn't see any questions come in, but if folks have something, you're certainly welcome to chime in now or type in something in chat or Q&A. We're happy to answer that. I think we do have a summary slide after this one. So I think what we want to say in summation here is that most intranet failures aren't really technical. It's really about how you approach the problem, how you're getting folks involved, understanding the tools that you're building with. So certainly want to highlight that. I think we talked about the idea of making sure you're getting a lot of folks involved, having those conversations, test drives, learning the product. And then the second part that we want to kind of highlight here, and you can see as sort of pervading through the conversation that we've had is that success, for a deployment really depends on intentional design and ownership. So you need someone to actually, own the different pieces. So like when Zach is talking about, like, you've got your department hub sites, is that you've identified a department owner, not just saying, oh, HR needs one, but we don't really know who controls it. Really, your success is really around making sure that people are getting what they want, you're building what they need intentionally, and that they've been identified and have some say over what they're actually receiving for a project. And with that, I don't see any questions have come in. We'll wait a couple more seconds here in case anybody has anything. In the interim, certainly reach out to us if you have any questions. We've got our email addresses here, or you can certainly call us at the sales number at 952-900-3832. And looks like we are good. I would like to say thank you for everyone for joining us today, and we hope to see you again soon. Thank you.
Thank you.